The wind howled in the darkness of the night as the rain fell relentlessly onto the deserted road. In the cab of a car, four friends, Lisa, John, Mike, and Sarah, drove down the dark road in search of a peaceful retreat. The purpose of the trip was to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and enjoy a weekend in the peaceful cabin they had rented deep in the forest. Sarah was behind the wheel, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. The darkness was dense, and the only sound that broke the silence was the incessant sound of rain hammering the roof of the car. The friends' anxiety and excitement grew as they approached their destination, but something about the night seemed out of place. The trees on the side of the road swayed ominously, as if they wanted to block the path. John looked out the window and murmured, "That doesn't seem right, Sarah. Maybe we should go back and ask someone for help." Mike and Lisa, who were in the back seat, agreed with the idea. Feeling that they were becoming more and more lost in the darkness, Sarah turned around to return to the main road. However, something sinister happened. When they tried to return the same way they had come, a dense fog enveloped the car, reducing visibility a few meters ahead. The fog seemed to close in around them, creating a feeling of claustrophobia. Fear began to creep in as they realized they were lost in the darkness and storm. The car continued to move forward, but the road seemed endless. The gnarled trees that surrounded the road seemed to close in around them, like shadowy claws trying to stop them from escaping. The feeling that something was wrong grew as the road stretched into the unknown. The storm was at its peak, with the rain falling relentlessly. The road was becoming increasingly slippery, and the GPS that had previously guided them was no longer responding. "This isn't normal," Lisa said, looking around with growing uneasiness. "Are we stuck?" Sarah continued to drive, following a road that seemed to have no end. The fog and rain made visibility practically zero. The storm was raging outside, and the dark road stretched out before them, seeming to lead them nowhere. The tension inside the car was palpable, and the feeling that they were being watched never left them. The forest seemed to hide dark secrets, and fear began to creep into their hearts. After an hour of aimless driving, Sarah finally stopped the car and looked at her friends, looking lost. "We can't go on like this. Let's find a place to rest and wait for the storm to pass." The friends agreed with relief and finally found a small roadside inn. The inn looked desolate, but the dim light shining from the main window indicated that someone was there. With a sigh of relief, Sarah parked the car and they ran to the inn, looking for shelter from the storm that never let up. The inside of the inn was as old-fashioned as it looked from the outside. Antique furniture filled the space, and a fireplace crackled in the corner of the room. An elderly man with deep wrinkles and tired eyes welcomed them. The storm is wreaking havoc in the area. It has toppled trees and cut off electricity. You are welcome to stay here until the weather is over. The little inn was as old-fashioned as the old owner who had welcomed them. The friends were grateful for finding shelter and relief from the storm. With dry towels in hand and a room available, they began to settle in, wishing they could leave behind the discomfort of the dark road they had traveled. The room was simple, with a four-poster bed and a window that looked out onto the darkness of the forest. The fireplace crackled, creating a welcoming atmosphere, but the feeling that something was wrong persisted. An uneasiness hung in the air, as if the inn itself was hiding dark secrets. Lisa looked out the window and watched the rain falling there outside, while the drops hit the glass insistently. The darkness of the surrounding forest seemed to harbor unfathomable secrets. The discomfort that the friends felt only increased as the night progressed. While Mike and John tried to light the fire, Sarah decided to explore the inn. She found the old owner in the living room, sitting in a rocking chair and watching the fire. She approached him with a forced smile and tried to break the silence. "It looks like the storm will last all night. Thank you for having us here." She expected to start a conversation, but the man just nodded and continued to watch the fire. Sarah felt a sense of discomfort grow as the man's blank stare disturbed her. She returned to her room, where she found her friends in front of the fireplace. "He's a strange guy," she said, sharing her concerns. "It seems he has something to hide, or maybe he's just an eccentric old man." The night passed slowly, with the friends struggling to relax amid the unrest that hovered around the inn. The wind was howling outside. The rain was relentless, and the darkness of the forest seemed to be approaching. Every sound of the night echoed eerily, intensifying his sense of fear. As midnight approached, the friends heard a strange sound coming from the hallway. It was like a distant whisper, almost inaudible. Sarah, Lisa, Mike, and John looked at each other, sharing the same feeling that something was wrong. They decided to investigate the sound and cautiously opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, and the fireplace light didn't provide enough light. As they moved down the hallway, the whispers became more audible, as if something or someone was communicating in a low voice. Finally, they reached the living room door, where the sound seemed to emanate from. Sarah, the bravest of the group, turned the handle and opened the door. What they found left them breathless. In the living room, the old owner was surrounded by lit candles and strange inscriptions drawn on the floor. He mumbled incomprehensible words in a language they had never heard before. The air was charged with strange energy, and a feeling that something supernatural was occurring spread. The old man turned to face them, his eyes fixed and bright in the darkness of the room. His face was contorted into a sinister smile, and his eyes reflected an indescribable malevolence. "You guys shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice echoing in the room. "This is a place they shouldn't have found." Fear gripped the friends when they realized they were witnessing something they didn't understand. They quickly retreated, closing the living room door and locking it. Back in their room, they shared their findings, trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. The gloomy atmosphere of the inn seemed increasingly ominous, and the feeling that something was terribly wrong haunted them. As they tried to decipher what they had seen, the whispers in the living room continued, as if the house itself was whispering dark secrets. They decided it was time to confront the owner and find out what was going on in that storm-haunted inn. The friends decided they needed to confront the mysterious inn owner and find out what was happening that terrifying night. With courage and apprehension, they walked to the living room door and slowly opened it, prepared to face the old man they had seen enveloped in a dark ritual. As they entered the room, the echoing whispers became more audible. The old owner still stood in the center of the circle of candles, muttering words in a strange language. His eyes glowed red, and a distorted smile curved his wrinkled lips. "What are you doing here?" shouted John, his voice filled with anger and fear. The old man slowly turned to face them. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "This is a place they shouldn't have discovered." Sarah, with a bold tone, asked, "What's going on? What are you doing?" The old man explained that the inn had been passed down from generation to generation in his family. There were ancient secrets and dark rituals that their lineage had maintained for centuries. He would not share details, but revealed that he was performing one of these rituals that night to ensure the safety of his family and all those who frequented the inn. Fear coursed through the group of friends as they tried to understand what those words meant. They insisted on knowing more, but the old man refused to reveal the specific details of the rituals. The atmosphere in the living room was filled with tension and dark secrets as the friends decided it was time to leave. They went back to their room, locked the door, and began to debate what to do next. Lisa was furious. "We can't stay here. This place is haunted by things we don't understand." Mike agreed. "We have to find a way to get out of here and get back on the road." Sarah, still curious about what was going on, suggested that they confront the old man again and try to convince him to help them leave the inn. John, on the other hand, was determined to find out what was going on. They decided that the best option was to wait until the old man finished his ritual. Then they would try to talk to him and convince him to let them leave safely. As they waited, they watched the darkness of the forest outside, feeling that something terrible was approaching. Hours passed, and the anxiety grew as the whispers in the living room subsided. Finally, they decided to leave the room and face the old man once again. When they entered the room, they found the living room in complete silence. The candles were out, and the old man was gone. There were no traces of the dark ritual he was performing before. Panic took over the friends. They searched the entire inn, but the old man was gone. The feeling that something sinister was happening that night only increased. They decided that the only option was to find a way out of the inn on their own. They went back to the room, grabbed their things, and tried to open the front door. But it was locked, and the sound of the wind howling outside seemed to mock them. Sarah looked out the window and saw that the storm was still raging outside. It was impossible to go out and face the darkness of the forest and the torrential rain. They were trapped in that ominous inn with the feeling that something terrible awaited them. While waiting in the living room, the friends began discussing what to do next. They had no choice but to wait until morning, hoping that the storm would pass and they could finally escape that cursed place. The night advanced slowly, while the inn seemed to whisper dark secrets in his ears. Every sound of the night was filled with fear and uneasiness, and the darkness of the forest continued to lurk outside the window. The journey along the Serpent Road had turned into a terrifying nightmare, and survival was far from guaranteed. The night seemed to have no end in the sinister inn. The friends stood on the edge of fear as the rain continued to fall outside and the darkness of the forest surrounded them. The feeling that something terrible was about to happen weighed on them. The old man had disappeared without a trace, and the inn was enveloped in silence. Fear of the unknown and uncertainty about the dark rituals he had mentioned plagued the group. Lisa, Mike, John, and Sarah knew they needed to find a way to get out of there as quickly as possible. The friends decided their best chance of escape was to wait until morning, when the storm had subsided and daylight brought some clarity to the situation. They settled in the room, keeping the door locked and the windows closed, apprehensive about every sound that came from the inn. However, time seemed to stretch infinitely, and the anxiety only grew. With each mysterious sound that echoed through the inn, the friends jumped, fearing that the old man or something more terrifying was about to appear. Finally, as the morning light began to illuminate the sky, the group decided it was time to leave the spooky inn. Sarah looked out the window and saw that the storm had weakened. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for. Carefully, they left the room and headed for the front door. As they turned the handle, a feeling of relief washed over them as the door opened. They were ready to put that nightmare behind them. However, upon leaving the inn, they soon realized that something was wrong. The darkness of the surrounding forest seemed thicker than ever, as if they were trapped in an endless nightmare. The feeling that the forest hid terrifying secrets never left them. They decided that the best course of action would be to follow the road that had taken them to the inn. The road was still wet, but the storm had turned into a light rain. Cautiously, they started walking towards the car, which was parked nearby. As they walked along the wet road, a sense of relief came over them as the prospect of leaving the cursed inn became a reality. However, the strange atmosphere around the inn did not leave them, and the forest seemed to be watching them with invisible eyes. As they approached the car, the feeling that something was wrong intensified. The vehicle appeared to be immersed in a fog that did not match its surroundings. With each step closer, the friends realized something was terribly wrong. When they finally reached the car, the sight that unfolded before them left them speechless. The car was covered in strange inscriptions and shadowy symbols, all made from a material that appeared to have been recently applied. The vehicle seemed to have been transformed into a sinister artifact that they could no longer use. Shock and fear coursed through the group as they tried to comprehend what had happened. They were trapped on that strange road and in the cursed inn. Sarah, fighting the panic that threatened her, said, "We can't stay here. We have to get on the road and find help as quickly as possible." The friends agreed and began to follow the road, determined to find a way out of this nightmare. The rain continued to fall, soaking them to the bone as the darkness of the forest surrounded them. The feeling that something terrible was lurking never left them. As they walked along the road, they passed familiar landmarks that brought them back to the road that had led them to the ominous inn. Hope grew that they would be able to escape, but fear and uncertainty tormented them. As they advanced along the road, the sound of distant footsteps caught the group's attention. They turned to face what was approaching and felt their hearts sink in terror. In the middle of the road, standing, was the man they had seen the night before, the same man with empty eyes. He was looking at them with an emotionless expression, as if he was no longer human. It was as if the road itself had brought him back to confront them. Fear gripped them as the empty figure approached. The darkness of the forest and the cold rain seemed accomplices in their terror. There was no escape, and the journey along the Serpent Road had turned into a terrifying nightmare from which they could not escape.